Well, Jay, we had such a lovely conversation with Dan Melnick. He, of course, is the GM at Bandcamp. And the top line for Bandcamp is that they are an online music distribution platform. They've been around since 2008. But that doesn't really say much. That doesn't cover enough of what they do. They are so unique in their space.
Yeah, it doesn't tell the whole story, does it? So get this. Fans have paid artists and their labels over $1.5 billion using Bandcamp. In the past 12 months alone, they've spent $196 million on 13.5 million digital albums, 11 million tracks, 1.5 million vinyl records, 750,000 CDs, 250,000 cassettes, and 50,000 T-shirts. So now without further ado, here's Dan Melnick on the Your Morning Coffee podcast. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 Standing by. Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Let's start from the top. For those with no prior knowledge, describe Bandcamp.
Sure. Bandcamp's an online record store where fans directly support the artists and labels they love by buying music from them. And so it's essentially a marketplace, right? So we have labels and artists come and they post their music, both digital and physical. So we sell, digital files, but we also sell vinyl and CDs and cassettes and T-shirts. And when a fan buys that, the vast majority of that money goes to the artist or label, around 85%, and we take our small cut, and it creates this virtuous cycle where a purchase, the money goes directly into the pockets of the artists, and it enables them to keep, producing the work that we all love as fans.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really become part of the fabric of the independent music community. I don't have a conversation with any indie artist that doesn't include Bandcamp. So let's talk. Let's get in the weeds a little bit and talk about the functionality of Bandcamp. Things like follow, chat, tour dates, recommendations, merch, all of that stuff. Talk a little bit about the functionality part of Bandcamp.
Sure. So, in addition to being able to upload your music and sell an album or a single or an EP, there's a lot of functionality to help enhance the relationship between fans and artists. So if you're a fan, you can follow an artist, you can follow a label, you can follow a tag or a genre as well. And all of those are aggregated into a feed where then you get updates on new releases and things like that. You can also follow other fans and see their purchases, so you get a little bit of that social functionality. Artists and labels have a community tab where they can message fans directly, and if fans opt in, artists and labels are also given access to their email address. So in a world where a lot of these relationships between artists and fans are extremely disintermediated by the platform, where they're really, abstractions, streaming numbers, things like this, you really have no way of reaching them other than pay to play. On Bandcamp, we really try and make sure that the artist has that direct relationship and can use that to market to them, whether it's a new release or tour dates or anything else, right? So part of what we provide artists to that end is a back end where they can see some analytics about where their purchases are coming from. If they buy our Pro plan, they get sort of enhanced analytics and they get some enhanced functionality around that type of targeting. So they can do things like say, hey, I'm going to be in Seattle and I want to send a message to fans, but only fans who have supported me, who have actually bought something. And so it's really great to be able to have that kind of direct access to your fans and to be able to speak to them directly. And then on the fan side, when you buy things on Bandcamp, you get to see them all in a collection, which is fun. I think any music collector has that enjoyment of seeing everything in one place. You can go back and download things if you want to download them to your hard drive or keep them for another use. A lot of DJs use that, right? They'll buy things on Bandcamp and use them for their sets. There's also a mobile app where you can listen to your collection, whether you're, going for a run or in your car. And if you're a fan, you could also participate in listening parties. So artists can schedule a listening party for their album. It's a live chat listening experience, so no video. It's really about listening to the music and interacting with the artist, asking them questions about what inspired them or what gear they used on a song. It tends to get into really passionate fan territory in those chats, which is great. I could go on, but I think those are, some of the key functionality that we see people using every day.
Dan, this should have been my first question, actually, but we should talk about your background and how you got to Bandcamp. You have very interesting trajectory, shall we say.
Sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So I have a background as a software engineer and in technology. And I was a part of the founding team of Reverb, which is a marketplace for musical instruments in 2012. And helped build that platform and grow it. So when we started, there was 3 of us in 2012 and grew the team to around 125, 150 when I left. When we sold the business to Etsy, that was 2019. And that's around when I left. And yeah, that was a great experience, got to scale both the team, but also the marketplace from scratch to when I left, I think we were doing around $600 to $700 million a year in sales of, music gear. Learned a ton about the musical instrument industry. It's primarily a used marketplace. And yeah, I'm very proud of Reverb. It's still great. I use it all the time. It's still thriving. I still have a lot of friends there.
As do we.
Yeah.
But don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I think there's some similarities to Bandcamp. I think like Bandcamp, it's become kind of critical infrastructure for musicians, who are looking for gear or selling gear, whether to fund their next gear purchase, whether to, have something for their new album, whatever the reason is. It's become one of those integral parts of being a musician in 2025. In between Reverb and Bandcamp, I ran product at Output, which is a music software company. That was a really great learning experience for me as well, just seeing a different part of the industry. Music software is very different than physical music gear, and it was really wonderful. It was an amazing team there. And then I joined Bandcamp, and yeah, Bandcamp is a marketplace like Reverb, but it's very, very different. These very different dynamics, and I think there's a lot of what I learned at Reverb that I've been able to apply, but mostly I've learned a lot about how different the dynamics are, and it's a very different world, and so you have to, not apply too many of your prior learnings. You really have to look at it with a fresh lens.
Wow. Yeah, one of the best things I think about Bandcamp is Bandcamp Fridays. Everybody knows about that. Talk a little bit about how you waive your revenue share and pass those funds directly to artists and labels. And it's a beast. It's a lot of revenue that's gone through that. Talk a little bit about Bandcamp Fridays.
Sure. So Bandcamp Fridays started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic in March of 2020, when all of a sudden musicians couldn't tour. And I wasn't part of Bandcamp at the time. I joined after that. But the team, being who they are and being who they how they see the world, their immediate response to that was, well, how can we help? What can we do for this community to ensure that they can make a living when one of their main, if not the main way to make a living in this day and age as musician was taken away? And so they came up with this idea for Bandcamp Friday, which is the first Friday of the month, where Bandcamp would waive its revenue share, and all of the money goes to the artist, minus payment processing fees that we can't control. And it was a huge hit, right? So I think, the music community really responded to that in terms of having a central place to go support musicians. Musicians spread the word about it to say, hey, this is a great time to go buy my music on Bandcamp. And then it turned into almost like this independent music holiday that was happening on a regular cadence, where artists and labels started scheduling their release for that day. And it became like a de facto, release day where people would promote things. And, even after the pandemic ended and maybe the original spirit of it was to support that, what we saw was that artists still really needed that support, even without the restrictions on touring. It had become a great brand and promotional vehicle for Bandcamp. I think it's a very aligned event for us. I think it's positive for everyone involved. And I think it's in keeping with the ethos of Bandcamp in general, right? Which is that we want to make sure that this community thrives and actually can make a living with their music. So we're still running them. We don't run them every Friday. I think this year we're running 7 of them, or every month rather. Every first Friday we don't run them, but I think we're running 7 this year, and we're planning to continue to do them into the future. And yeah, it's incredibly positive, and we've paid out an obscene amount of money to artists on those Fridays, and I shouldn't say obscene. A worthy and appropriate.
Well over $100 million. That's not nothing.
Yeah, obscene as on its own. What I guess I'm just making the distinction that I think it's good. These are the numbers that artists should be getting paid, right? And I think it's a great way to be introduced to Bandcamp. So if you're a fan and you buy on a Bandcamp Friday and you feel the spirit of it, I don't know, when I go on the site or on the app on a Bandcamp Friday, on the front page of Bandcamp, we have a live ticker of the sales happening. On a Bandcamp Friday, it just flies by, just this constant stream of purchases. I'm really inspired by that. On every end of that, there's a fan who's choosing to buy something to support an artist, and that's really, really powerful.
Right on, for sure. As we mentioned before we hit record, I play guitar, Jay plays guitar, you play guitar. If you play guitar, you must know who Tom Bukovac is and what an outstanding talent he is. He and Guthrie Trapp made a record. It was called In Stereo. When it was first released, it was only available on Bandcamp. Do you see Bandcamp exclusivity as a trend?
Well, I think what I see is Bandcamp being used as part of a windowing strategy. So whether they choose to make it exclusive in the long run, I think is really a decision for the artist. And there's some artists that's going to work well for, and some that it won't, right? But I think the idea of putting your music on Bandcamp first exclusively, and then deciding when and how to put it on streaming is a really great strategy for a much larger swath of musicians and artists, right? And really what it does is maximizes your earning potential, because your fans then have one place to find it, and it's a place where they actually have to buy it to find it. And then for the longer tail of that kind of passive revenue, you can put on streaming later. But if you put it on streaming immediately at the same time as Bandcamp, some large portion of your fans are just going to choose not to pay for it. It's just the reality that we've seen. And so I think having that exclusive period is a trend we're already seeing, and I think is going to continue. And I think we'll accelerate in the next year or two as more artists figure it out.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite, probably top 5 albums of last year was that Tom Bukovac, Guthrie Trapp. There's a really great video of them with Rick Beato that you should look up if you're into that sort of thing. But the album's called In Stereo, and I first bought it on Bandcamp, and it was in heavy rotation in my car for a long time. Let's switch gears here just a little bit. Artificial intelligence is in the news every week. What is sort of the Bandcamp stance on AI generated or AI assisted songs on your platform?
Sure. Well, first off, I want to make it clear that Bandcamp has an explicit policy against using any of the music on Bandcamp for training. So none of the music that's posted on Bandcamp can be used to train models, and we're very, very clear on that in our terms. We're still developing exactly how we're going to articulate our stance on it for music that's posted to Bandcamp. The ethos of Bandcamp, though, is about supporting living artists. So I think it's pretty clear that fully Gen AI music is not in keeping with the spirit of Bandcamp. I think it gets more tricky and fuzzier when you get into the sort of AI-assisted music. And, you know, I think the tricky thing there is figuring out where we're going to draw that line exactly on what constitutes Gen AI versus AI-assisted. I'm sure lots of music on Bandcamp has already had some element of AI in it, whether it's mastering, right? AI mastering is not that new, right? AI mixing is happening more and more. And at sort of the sample level or even the effects level, I'm sure there's a lot of AI usage there as well, right? You can generate a sample. You can, using some of these neural nets, model different effects, right? And so I think what I'm really happy about being Bandcamp in 2025, being at Bandcamp, is that we're incredibly well positioned, because at the end of the day, in the streaming world, when there's Gen AI, like that new band that's been in the news, Velvet Sundown, whatever they're called. Yeah. They're taking a piece out of a finite pie, right? Like that is actively harming living musicians when that artist gets streams, because it's one pie being divided up, right? At Bandcamp, we don't have that problem. We do in the sense that people have finite money to spend, right? But if people chose to buy that music, it's not quite the same as people streaming it and taking that out of that pie in the streaming world. Yeah. So I do expect that we'll have a clearer policy that's communicated, hopefully, in the near future. But I think the spirit of Bandcamp is clear. We're here to support living artists, and we want to make that really clear in however that's articulated.
That's a great slogan. Bandcamp, yeah. We're here to support living artists.
Exactly.
I mean, I should be clear too. Lots of reissues and other things sell on Bandcamp, so they don't totally have to be living, right? But I will say that in general, that's my preference and why I love Bandcamp. But an interesting statistic about Bandcamp compared to streaming is that 70% of our sales come from new releases, 30% come from back catalog. And in the streaming world, that's basically inverted. So 70% of streams go to back catalog and 30% go to new music. So I think that's a really interesting way of understanding where Bandcamp's strengths lie, where our audience is relative to supporting living artists like I'm talking about, and just engaging with new music. I think it's a muscle that you have to keep using, especially as you get older. If you want to do that, it's really easy to slip into listening to back catalog and nostalgia.
Sure. And the key word there, I think, is support. One of the reasons I use Bandcamp so much is I feel like it's my way of supporting some of these developing and middle class artists in the same way that when I go to a show, I go to the merch table. I don't necessarily need another shirt or need to buy that vinyl, but it's that small way of supporting. And I think that's sort of your superpower in some ways, is people go there because they know it's going to directly benefit those artists.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really powerful. And I think, what's funny is that, that's not new, obviously, right? Like that's more the history of the recorded music industry is more like Bandcamp than it's like streaming, where you paid for things and artists got paid. Sure, sometimes there was different or more middlemen in the middle in terms of artists making money. But to your point, yeah, I think it's really powerful. And I think we hear stories all the time from artists saying, I made my rent on Bandcamp this month thanks to everyone's support. I made, the repair to my tour van so I could go on tour, these types of things. And it's a lot of little purchases. It's $10 and $15 adding up amongst a bunch of fans. And the other subtext there is that, I wouldn't have made that in years on streaming, right? Yeah. Years. And they make it quickly and in a very direct way on Bandcamp. And that's what makes it so powerful.
That's awesome. On Bandcamp Daily this last week, there was a cool label profile by Jennifer Kelly titled Worried Songs in a Streaming Age Antidote. Tell us and our listeners about Bandcamp Daily.
Yeah, well, first, I love that article. That was a great write-up of a great label and a ton of great artists. Bandcamp Daily is really sort of the cultural voice of Bandcamp. And part of how I think of the Daily is that music scenes are not just about musicians, right? Music scenes are made up of the musicians, venues, the support staff at venues, and crucially, journalists and radio DJs and people who help provide context to the music and get the word out in other ways. And in an age where a lot of that's happening with algorithms, we're still really committed to the art of music journalism and to engaging with an audience that still values that. And I think there's a lot of overlap between people who are motivated to read about music and people who are actually going to buy it, right? Who aren't just interested in totally passive, lean back, playlist style discovery. And Bandcamp just launched, new playlist functionality. So we have nothing against playlists, right? But the extra context I find really valuable, and that article is a great example of more backstory about great artists I love, great music I love, and it also provides that kind of recommendation engine of, I like this one record, I didn't even realize it was on this label, I'm gonna go check out this other one that's on this label, and it gives artists a voice, right? They get quoted in these articles. They can use it for their press kit when they're going on tour. These things are still really valuable, despite a lot of these things changing. These write-ups and having that editorial voice, I think, is really, really important for Bandcamp as a brand and also for the artists who are discussed in the articles.
What kind of advice would you give an independent artist today that has no prior knowledge about Bandcamp, and you're sitting down with them and they're saying, well, how can we best leverage Bandcamp as part of our overall plan? What sort of advice would you give them? Sure.
Well, first, it's use it. So it sounds silly, but it's zero cost and it's all upside, right? So I occasionally talk to an artist and it seems like they're really overthinking it. And part of what I try to tell them is it's good to think about it some, but this shouldn't be something of like, should I, shouldn't I, right? You definitely should. Why would you not post your music on a place where we know that people are paying for music, right? It sounds silly, again, but it's true. We've collected an audience of people who want to support musicians and pay for it. Very little downside to putting your music up. That said, the artists who succeed invest in their Bandcamp presence, invest in promoting it so that their fans know that they're on Bandcamp, and do more than just sort of set it and forget it. So, I think a lot of artists and people in general have gotten used to these kind of algorithmic platforms where you put things up and something happens and it's out of your control and either it goes viral or it's a dud, but, you're not very involved in that outcome other than betting on putting something up. On Bandcamp, it's still a little bit more involved in the sense that the albums that do well are albums where people put some care into the liner notes, for instance, right? We have data on fans want more context around the album. They want to know who plays on it. They want a little bit of extra info. And if you put that care in, you'll get more sales. Similarly, if you're starting from scratch on Bandcamp, tell your fans, hey, come follow me on Bandcamp so you can hear my new releases. Hey, I put up my back catalog. Maybe you put up some B-sides to entice them, right? Something that you haven't released on streaming to get them in. There's lots of ways to do that. But the goal is to build up an audience on Bandcamp, because then some of the network effects of Bandcamp start to kick in. So it's not that you have to, promote music on Bandcamp to get sales, right? There are discovery-based features on Bandcamp, like the feed we talked about earlier, where you can follow other fans. So, I follow you, Jay, and you buy an album, then I can see it, right? And, I have a chance to check it out, and I know Jay has great taste, so I'm going to go check this out, and then maybe I decide to buy it. But you have to get those first ones to get the ball rolling, to get the snowball turning, right? So it takes a little bit of investment, but then after that, it just grows and grows. And if you look at some of the artists and labels that have invested in Bandcamp, it's a really critical part of their infrastructure and income now. So I think, my first message again is do it. Don't wonder, should I do it or shouldn't I? But then if you're going to do it right by investing in it and make sure you spread the word.
Nice. Dan, as you look down the road and look into your crystal ball, how do you see Bandcamp evolving over the next 5 years, say, in a competitive, what is certainly a competitive digital music landscape?
Yeah, well, I think, I think Bandcamp's really well positioned in that landscape for some of the reasons we mentioned around AI and other reasons. We're starting to see more backlash against streaming. There's been a small wave of bands pulling their music off Spotify recently. We had Deerhoof. We just had King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. It's a mouthful, but they do quite well on Bandcamp, and I expect them to do even better now that their music isn't available on Spotify. And so I think that's a bigger trend than we can tell right now. I think that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. But additionally, I think what you're going to see is that Bandcamp is going to grow as sort of a bigger tent. So whereas people might have thought of it as, this is for independent music, or however you classify that or think about it, in reality, there's nothing stopping any musician, no matter how big they are, from taking advantage of Bandcamp. And I think Bandcamp has grown from the bottom up in this grassroots way, and we've gone from just artists to small labels to now we have, the Beggars Group, right, which is not a major, but they're in that league.
Pretty big.
Yeah, it's pretty big, right? And we have major label music on Bandcamp. We have sub-labels like None Such. None Such is part of the Warner Music Group, right? So I think you're going to see that trend continue, and you're going to see more labels and bigger labels adopt Bandcamp, and that'll bring in more fans, and we'll see that growing to the point where I think there will be a point where if you want to buy music on Bandcamp, it'll be there. We'll still be very focused on independent music and reward independent music infrastructure and labels and things like that. But I think you'll see the available music on Bandcamp continue to grow. And not just grow in that way, but also grow globally. One of my favorite things personally about Bandcamp is going on the site and finding some small band in Brazil or Nigeria or, anywhere in the world. And their music's incredible, and I get that sense of discovery that I've always loved, whether it's from going in record stores and finding a used record and buying it just because the cover looks cool. I get that feeling when I'm looking around Bandcamp and I'm sort of exploring through tags and trying to find something a little off the beaten path, and you find that gem, Yeah. I think as we continue to grow, we'll get more of that as well, and I think that's really exciting. So I think Bandcamp will continue to thrive in that world.
Yeah, I think that's one of the strengths of Bandcamp is discovery. So that's sort of a good way to wrap this up. But before we let you go, I love that Bukovac Guthrie Trap record. It's so good. You guys, The Accidentals, I love. Are there a few artists that you are listening to now that maybe our listeners could discover?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the label that I'm wearing a t-shirt of, which I also purchased on Bandcamp. One of my favorite labels out of Chicago is International Anthem. And they put out a lot of great records this year. They always do. But one that I've been listening to a lot is, here, I'm going to pull it up so I don't mispronounce anyone's name. So is my
no problem.
Nightmare. Different Rooms by Jeremiah Chu and Marta Sophia Honer. It's strings and modular synth, and there's some great special guests on it, and I've been sort of playing it on repeat. It's a really beautifully crafted album, and I love it. Let's see what else recently. Speaking of a great album from Brazil, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, so I apologize, but there's this album, Cabeza a Mil e o Corpo Lento by Alberto Continentino. Amazing album from Rio de Janeiro. Really beautiful, sort of MBP, MPB, thank you, style music. If you like, Gilberto Gil or Caetano Veloso, you'll probably like that record. And then let's see what else. I really liked Mark Giuliano's new record, Questions Volume 1. He's an amazing drummer. He's in St. Vincent's touring band. He was on David Bowie's Black Star record. But he's also a great composer. It's very sort of filmic, soundtracky, vibey kind of thing, and I really have been enjoying that record. So we could talk all day about music.
I love it.
There are a few that have been really on repeat for me recently, and well, let me give you one more, because those were all very sort of there's Singing on the Brazilian record I mentioned, but Humanhood by the Weather Station, one of my favorite records of the year. Really interesting. They recorded it all live and then did some overdubs, but it's got this very live feeling to it. It's really well produced, really great sounding record, and amazing songwriting. So that's fantastic. Fun to round out my picks.
Thank you, Dan. And if you ever hear of something that just really lights you up, please send it to me and Mike, and so we can shout it from the rooftops. But continued success. We'd love to have you on again to talk shop. This has been so much fun. And that's Bandcamp Fridays. So much going on over there, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Great chatting.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.